All right, so today we are going to be talking about comprehensible input. And that's, oops, that's a long word. That just means helping your students to understand the language that they hear and they read. That's what it means to be comprehensible. It means it can be understood. And input is just the language that they are getting, whether spoken or written. So, one of the first things that we need to do um, to make ourselves understood to our students is to slow down. It's one of the most common things people will say when they're learning a new language is that the native speakers speak too quickly. And so, as a teacher, if you can slow down your speech for the beginning students, it makes it easier for them to understand. I've been teaching ESL for more than 20 years, so I've learned to speak slowly, and I do it almost all of the time. It's just my habit now. You don't want to speak too slowly all the time because students what will happen is, and I've had students say this, they're like, I can understand the teacher, but I can't understand anyone else who speaks English. And so we want to slow down our speech. That will make it easier for them to process, to take in the words that are coming at them, and to think about them. So it's a balance sometimes. Um, and I want to, oh, there you guys are. Okay. Oh, and it looks like we've got someone else joining us. Paris is joining us. Hello, Paris. Um, so slowing down is our first technique. The second technique is to filter your vocabulary. Don't give your students too many words. For example, if I'm teaching the word pen, um, many times we will have a tendency to say, today we are going to learn a new word, and the new word is pen. And here we have in my hand a pen. Okay, so that was a bunch of words, and the student may not understand all of the words. But if we just hold it up and say, a pen, a pen, that is filtering our vocabulary. So cutting out the extra words can make it easier for our students to focus on the important words that they need to learn. I had a situation once in a class where I was pointing to different objects in the room, and I was saying, here we have a wall, and over here we have a window, and up here we have a ceiling. And so one of the students raised his hand and said, what's a here we have a? And I said, nothing. Here we have a is nothing. And then I would just go wall, window, ceiling, and it was much easier for them to understand. So think about those extra words that we throw into conversations, and try to filter those out. Just use the absolutely necessary words when you're working with beginners. A third thing we can do is ask questions of our students, and this helps them to interact and to indicate if they're understanding what we're saying. So after I've taught them a few times, a pen, I can say, what is this? And then they have to answer, it's a pen. Or we can say, where is the wall? And they can point or walk over to it and say, this is the wall. We can give them choices and say, is this a phone or a pen? And then they can say, oh, it's a phone, right? So asking them questions gets them to interact, to produce language. And even when they have very little language, they can point, they can start to say one word. Even if they don't remember the word and you say, what is this? And they say, oh, I don't remember. Then you can give them a choice. Is it a pen or a wall? And then they'll go, oh, it's a pen. It's a pen, because you've given them that choice. So keep asking questions appropriate to their level. And that's going to help them understand, and it's going to help you see that they understand. Otherwise, if you are doing all the talking, you might assume that they understand, but they really don't. Because many times, even if people don't understand, they will smile and nod, and you think, okay, they've got it. And then you ask them a question, you realize, no, they don't. And that's why I always say the one question you don't want to ask is, do you understand? Because most of the time they just go, yes, but they really don't. So ask those W questions: who, what, where, what is this, where is it, etc. So as far as asking questions, do you guys have any questions for me so far?
No questions yet. I totally get the lesson though, as in, like, this is a really good lesson for me, um, because with my Ukrainian refugees, they had some words, but yeah, it's definitely, there's a limited amount I can say, and and everything, and so it's been very helpful to to work with them, and for this lesson here. Some of them using, some of them not. So thank you for the clarification, but no questions.
Okay.
No question.
Okay.
Yes, some student is when we are asking, do you understand? Just they say yes, and then if when we are asking again, some no, they don't know that kinds of thing. Also, yes, it is.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Oops, I keep going backwards. Let me go back there. Yeah, thank you for those comments. All right, now the next thing we have. Oh, and let me talk about also. It's not on this chart, I don't think, but translation. So once in a while, it can be helpful to translate. When you've tried some of these other techniques and they're not getting it, we can use Google Translate, or they can use a bilingual dictionary to look up a word. But we don't want to rely all the time on translating, because what can happen is, I learned this from a mistake I made for a long time. When the students know that you're going to translate everything for them, they stop paying attention to your English and they just wait for the translation. So I used to do that when I would have classes where all the students spoke Spanish, and I spoke Spanish, I would, I would say, this is a wall, pared in Spanish. And they would write it down. They would write down every word in Spanish, but then they really were not retaining the English words at all, because they tuned out. They knew, okay, she's going to say it in English a couple times, but then she'll say it in Spanish and I'll understand. So we do need to do it occasionally. We don't want to overdo it. The fourth thing we're going to look at is repetition. So if we repeat the information a few times, they are more likely to get it. If we say it once and they don't understand it, try saying it again a little bit slower. You can also try saying it in a slightly different way, using a little bit different words and adding some of these other things to it, like gestures or facial expressions or objects. But repetition really helps a lot. I know when someone's speaking Spanish to me quickly, I often have to say, please repeat. And then when they repeat it the second time, I got it. But that first time it can go by so quickly, and you're not quite sure. Repeating gives them another chance to understand. All right. Gesturing is a really good way to communicate as well. If we use our hands, we can point at things, we can indicate. There's some signals that we learn. For example, when I'm teaching the past tense, I'll always point backwards over my shoulder. And when I'm teaching the future tense, I'll point forward in front of me. I can also make gestures when I want my students to speak. I'll say a pen. So I speak and you speak. I speak and you speak. We can also do things like, please listen. Please listen. And, please repeat. It doesn't really matter what gestures you use, as long as you do them consistently and your students start to know what they mean. But using your body to communicate, and even movement, is going to help them a lot. So if you normally speak with your hands down at your side, get in the habit of using your hands a little bit more and using your body language. I remember I had one student from Bosnia, and she was an older woman, and she barely knew any English. She knew like 10 words in English, but she was so animated and so good with gestures that she would be able to tell the class stories, and we would all be laughing so hard. She told us a story once about how the police pulled her over as she was driving to work, but just with barely any language, she was like, I drive, I see, woo, 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 I scared, I stop, man come, just like with barely any words, but she acted it out. We could understand the whole thing. And so as you get more comfortable with using gestures and sounds, you can tell stories that your students will understand, even if they don't understand every word. So that brings us to the next one, which is sound effects. Many times when we're learning words, like if we learn siren, a siren, I can show kind of the siren goes woo, 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 and there's a light flashing. So he'll kind of do a gesture and a sound with that. Or You know, if we're learning the names of different animals, we can make those animal sounds, or even, you know, a car, vroom, vroom, those kind of things. So feel free to use sound effects that you make with your voice. You can even play recordings, right? So you could play a recording of a bird song and say, what is this? This is a bird. But engaging all of the senses can really help them learn and retain information. And this goes along with the next one, making facial expressions. So you can use exaggerated facial expressions to show, you know, you're happy, you're sad, you're surprised. And those go a long way towards communicating the tone of a story, like when we're reading a Bible story, and something sad is happening or something scary is happening, they can pick up those emotions from our face. Again, I'll stop. Do you guys have any questions or comments here? And have you used any of these? Okay, I'm sure you have. I'll go on to the next one. Then we have simplify your lessons. Don't try to teach them 20 new things in one lesson. Try to break it down to 1 or 2 or 3 things you really want to focus on, and let the rest of it go. Sometimes we feel compelled to try to cover, you know, all of the slides in a lesson in 1 hour or something like that. And it can be overwhelming for our students. So there's only so much information our little brains can take in before they get full and shut down. You can see that sometimes your students, their eyes will glaze over and you realize they're full, their brains are full, they're not taking in anything more today. So if we simplify, look at your lesson and, you know, what's the most important 1 or 2 things you want them to get out of this, to retain and remember. Just focus on that. Break down the content into smaller bites for them to take in. And then in the bottom row, the first one we have is illustrate. I like to make, if I have a whiteboard, I'll make drawings on the board. Even if you're using Zoom or Google Meet. With Google Meet, you can use Jamboard. With Zoom, you can use the built-in whiteboard, or you can just write on your PowerPoint presentation. But I make very simple, primitive drawings. I just make little stick people, usually. I'm not a great artist, but even with that, you can get ideas across. So, you know, if somebody asks, what is, you know, we see a word, well, what is a bridge? You know, I can draw just a simple little, show running water underneath and a little bridge going over it and say, that's a bridge. You know, I just have to draw 2 or 3 lines and they can get that idea. So many teachers will say, oh, I'm not an artist. Oh, I can't draw. And then I show them my drawings and they're like, oh, okay. So you don't have to be an artist. Just very simple stick figures, little lines are going to help get the ideas across. And even better is using props if you have them. And so we recommend, before you teach your lesson, take a look in the teacher's notes. It'll give you some suggestions of items you can bring in. So if you're teaching the lesson on clothing and colors. You can bring in, different colored socks or t-shirts. You can bring in a box of crayons or colored pencils, so that you have those props to show them. It's always really nice when we can use real objects. You can also do things like, dressing up. Sometimes students enjoy when we do the conversations, A and B. We can use like hats or different hats or wigs or mustaches to indicate that they are two different people. And depending on your class, some really get into it, acting out the different parts of the conversation. When we do role plays, like we have a doctor and a patient, we might have one person wearing a white jacket to represent the doctor, and the patient has a Band-Aid on their hand, a bandage on their hand to represent that they are the patient. So that can make the learning more fun and a little more realistic. Another technique is to contrast meaning using opposites. So whenever you teach something that has an opposite, we try to introduce the opposites together. So if we're learning things like big and small, or tall and short, or black and white, dark and light, heavy and light, those are all light, but we can show how they contrast with another meaning. And that's a very clear way to say, now I am near, back up, now I am far, now I am near, now I am far. So teaching those words in pairs is very effective. And the last one that is really helpful is to get active, get your students moving around the room, get yourself moving around the room, using gestures. If you're teaching the word walk, when we're on Zoom, I have to teach the word walk like this. But when we are in the classroom, we can teach the word walk by walking around the classroom. And then we can use, we can say to students things like, please put up your right hand, please clap your hands, please jump in the air. That's called total physical response. And so that's a technique where, as you are learning the words, you're actually doing the actions that go with the words, and that helps to reinforce it because you're physically feeling the movement of those words as you are doing them. So those are just a few of the techniques we have for comprehensible input. So I hope that this was helpful for you guys today. Thanks so much.